This means that your non-disclosure agreement is nullified. You can completely speak to this group and to me, notwithstanding that, because your non-disclosure agreement was predicated on a legal national security program. In reality, that was a sort of a head fake. It was a hoax. And your non-disclosure agreement is non-binding. You don't have to obey it because the programs you were attached to were themselves illegal and unconstitutional. Therefore, there is no national security cover for them. Final card is that they're planning to play World War III, alien invasion, all kinds of other horrific things in order to seize global totalitarian militaristic power. This is what's being discussed with some very senior operators who've been involved in projects that are clearly illegal, up to including wet works, murder, kidnapping, abductions, human trafficking, the whole nasty business involving UAPs and UFOs. Because of that, any activity from that point on can be prosecuted, because when it's an ongoing conspiracy, there is no limits. Your non-disclosure agreement is non-binding. You don't have to obey it because the programs you were attached to were themselves illegal and unconstitutional. Your immunization, where you can never be prosecuted for any of this, is contingent on full disclosure of all information you possess and recall. We have handed over a few dozen whistleblowers that have come to and through us over the last couple of years. This has resulted in significant leads and the expansion through their own investigation of many other assets, confirming both the conspiracy, the criminal activity, wet works murders, and things of this sort related to UAP operations and cover-up. We're at the point now where there's a clear mandate to move this forward fairly quickly in the coming months. And I want to be very careful in explaining this to people. It may sound a little technical, but I want everyone to hear it. And then I want you to spread this all over the internet, particularly if you are in a network of people who have been military, JSOC, special forces, corporate, aerospace, or others, government agencies that might have had anything to do with this issue over the last 70 years, 65 years. Why do I put that date on it? It was in the late 1950s that we can establish that the operations dealing with UFOs were separated from the control of the executive, the president of the United States, and also from key oversight in the Congress. Because of that, any activity from that point on can be prosecuted, because when it's an ongoing conspiracy, there is no limits. In other words, there's no, what's the term that's used? Statute of limitations. Normally a statute, let's say if you've committed robbery or some other crime, there is a statute of limitations, not on murder, but on many others. But when it's an ongoing criminal enterprise, the clock doesn't stop, right? For that reason, anybody with information or who was involved 60 years ago, maybe they're in their 80s, can come forward. And if they have material, documents, videos, photographs, physical, all of it can be protected, and the people can be now fully immunized, but it's conditional.
Is not open by trying to prove that UFOs exist. He opens by alleging that the real story is organized criminality tied to UAP secrecy, and that is an important distinction. In official Washington, the UAP issue already crossed into formal oversight with the House hearing of July 26, 2023, titled Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Implications on National Security, public safety, and government transparency. But AARO's public position is still that it has found no evidence of extraterrestrial technology. That contrast gives Greer's opening its charge. He is not arguing mystery. He is arguing concealed illegality against an official backdrop still defined by
So let me be very, very clear on this. Your immunization, where you can never be prosecuted for any of this, is contingent on full disclosure of all information you possess and recall. Names, places, code names of operations, project locations, everything. Anything withheld will terminate your immunity agreement. So I want to be very clear on this. It means that you can't tell a half-truth, you can't withhold information. But if you're honest and come forward with integrity, you'll be completely protected. Now that is operational, and I encourage people, if we're ever going to unravel this and solve this problem for our nation and for the world, now's the time to do it. There's a window. Obviously, it's dangerous. There have been a number of threats and problems that have occurred around what we're doing. There has been loss of life over the last couple of years. Everybody knows what we've gone through and I've gone through, but now is the time to move with alacrity and clarity. So I'm putting this call out for people to come forward, and it doesn't matter whether you're currently involved at a lower level or a higher level, or whether you were involved back decades ago. It's all covered and you need to come forward. Now, here's the flip side of that. Because in a conspiracy charge, the left hand doesn't have to know what the right hand's doing. So let's say you were a special forces operator at facility X, right? And if you go to our briefing document and our archive, you'll see we have almost 160 sites where these operations have been ongoing that we know about. And you might have been a 20, 30-year-old person. You certainly thought that what you were doing was legal, but it wasn't. Here's the problem. Because you were embedded unknowingly in an operation like that, technically you're liable. There's a liability for having involved in these programs, and particularly now that it's being made known, where I'm basically the public face of it, to say you can be immunized, you're covered for anything that may have happened or that you saw happen that you didn't report, and your slate is wiped clean. But if you withhold information, it's later found you were involved, this is a problem for you individually, for that person. So because this has become that serious, where it has been concluded that there are serious high crimes that have occurred, this is the time to come forward, because there's a clear pathway. You can contact us at drstevengreer.com, and there on that website, there's a toolbar for witnesses. You can hit it, contact us.
Second section is the operational heart of the pitch. Greer frames disclosure not as a media act, but as a legal intake process. The Justice Department's Criminal Resource Manual states that conspiracy is a continuing offense, and that timing can run from the last overt act or until the conspiracy's purpose is achieved or abandoned. That is why Greer keeps using words like ongoing conspiracy, full disclosure, and immunity. He is trying to shift the audience away from folklore and into prosecutorial logic, even though the specific UAP crimes he alleges remain his claims, not public indictment.
You will be kept in complete confidentiality from the public unless and until you want to go public. And we will then hand that information to the people who can both protect you and utilize your information to solve this problem that has been ongoing for 70 years. So that's a very big development that's become more clarified, let's say, and has also become a more robust effort over the last few months. And I would strongly encourage people to network in your circles, family, friends, social media, work, what have you, to see if there are people who have information who want to come forward, because they can be completely immunized from anything that they saw and didn't report, which, by the way, is also a crime, or were part of directly. So I think it's very important for people to use this opportunity to come forward. And what we want this to be is from a few dozen or maybe 100 or two prospective living people, that it grows to a few thousand, all the way up the chain of command, all the way up. And that's how you do this. The other thing that's very important is that names, places, dates, code names of projects, all very important, because to unravel this, keep in mind, the constitutional government of the United States, until we started providing very detailed information a few years ago, really didn't know where the washroom was on this. They didn't know the most senior people, for example, at Senate Intelligence and at the Pentagon I've met with, didn't know where these subterranean facilities or dumb underground bases are, deep underground military bases. They didn't know about the NRO satellites that had been weaponized with neutrino light detectors. They didn't know about the underground connector system that goes from Edwards to Nellis Air Force Base, et cetera. So things that people who followed our work and this subject for years, believe it or not, the senior people in the US government, they were there until very recently, they were asking the question, do UAPs and UFOs even exist, and what are they, right? So 3 years ago, when I first entered the SCIF for the Senate Intelligence Committee, that's where they were. Now it's gone way beyond that, and it's crossed out of congressional sausage making, let's say, over into serious law enforcement investigation and pursuit. So it's a big development, and we're asking for people to help us. It's certainly something that is an opportunity also for people who have been, and I know, this is what's being discussed with some very senior operators who've been involved in projects that are clearly illegal, up to including wet works, murder, kidnapping, abductions, human trafficking, the whole nasty business involving UAPs and UFOs. Those folks are, going to be able to be completely immunized so long as they disclose everything. And then also they need to name the people above them.
Next move is scale. Greer expands from a few insiders to a full witness ecosystem: family, networks, social media, chain of command, old cases, living witnesses, names, places, dates, and project codes. That witness-first model has been central to his work for decades. A BC reported in 2001 that about 20 former government and military figures appeared with Greer at the National Press Club, while he claimed roughly 400 witnesses were prepared to testify before Congress. So the structure here is deliberate. Greer is not selling one dramatic revelation. He is selling accumulation.
This goes out. This means that your non-disclosure agreement is nullified. You can completely speak to this group and to me, notwithstanding that, because your non-disclosure agreement was predicated on a legal national security program. In reality, that was a sort of a head fake. It was a hoax. And your non-disclosure agreement is non-binding. You don't have to obey it, because the programs you were attached to were themselves illegal and unconstitutional. Therefore, there is no national security cover for them. And this was, by the way, the assessment we reached in 1994 after I briefed the director of the CIA and people close to the president at the time, President Clinton, and other people in Congress, where it was made very clear to me they were being denied access. And I immediately concluded, and so did constitutional attorneys I spoke with, concluded that in fact those programs are illegal, and therefore all the paperwork, all the non-disclosure agreement, all the sort of, intimidation of operators and people who worked at Lockheed Skunk Works in Northrop, that goes away, because those programs were being run illegally. It's basic law that if you're running an illegal operation, you can't then invoke the law to protect yourself, right? It's absurd. Let's use an analogy. let's say you're, part of a mafia family and you're running a whole bunch of businesses and shell corporations doing criminal activity. Well, you might have signed a non-disclosure agreement with that company, but it's completely unenforceable because the underlying business was illegal, right? It's an unenforceable contract. So all of you guys who have signed, and women who've signed these non-disclosure agreements, whether with military, corporation, intelligence agencies, whatever it is, shred them. They're absolutely unenforceable. Now people will say, well, that's easy to say. How do we get protected? And for years I would say, well, that's the law. We could always contest it. Now there's a pathway for you to be completely immunized. And in doing so, it also protects your pension, your retirement, if you're on and by the way, there have been a number of government and military, both civilian and military, who have said, I signed a 80-year non-disclosure agreement, and it clearly states that if I go outside that, I lose all my pensions and I'll be penniless. I'll be homeless on the street because I'm 70 years old or whatever. That's not the case now.
This is the most important block in the entire video because it anchors the entire narrative in contract failure, whistleblower law, and personal risk. The DOJ Inspector General states that non-disclosure policies cannot supersede lawful communications to Congress, inspectors general, or protected whistleblower channels under the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act. In 2015, the SEC penalized KBR because its confidentiality language had the potential to silence whistleblowers. That gives Greer's argument real legal gravity, although his larger claim that an entire UAP secrecy regime becomes broadly unenforceable at once goes beyond what these public precedents themselves prove.
So this is a very big development. It's kind of hard to overstate what a major breakthrough and development this has been. It's been evolving over the last couple of years, and now it's reached a much higher level. So I encourage people to do this and reach out to us and take this podcast and put it around all over the internet. Because I've been specifically asked to help message this to people out there who follow this breaking development with disclosure and cooperate, because that's how this whole operation that's been illegal gets unwound and basically stopped, so that the worst plans they have, which are yet to come, can't be actuated. Right? Because the very worst capabilities have not yet been fully applied. Yes, they've done, fake human abductions, they've done trafficking, they've done mutilations of animal and people, they've done all kinds of unconstitutional behaviors, they've embezzled over the years trillions of dollars from the Treasury, from various government departments and agencies, not just military and intelligence. We know from Catherine Austin Fitts, there was huge amounts of money going out of housing and urban development, right? You think had nothing to do with these black projects. Well, they do. They take that money and pull it out. So but the worst is the capabilities of what the final card is that they're planning to play. World War III, alien invasion, all kinds of other horrific things in order to seize global totalitarian militaristic power. That's the 70-year plan. Werner von Braun spoke of it on his deathbed. I've had many people who have been in those programs operationally who have described what that is and that the capability is fully in place to do it. The only way we prevent a disaster here is that people come together who understand what the stakes are. Even if you are not operating at that level of information, you are a cog in a machine that was illegal and doing these horrible things, and also have the worst plans that they're planning to do. So I think the only way to prevent this from becoming a catastrophe for us as a species, humans, is to get these capabilities wound down and stopped. There's a good shot at that now. It's a David and Goliath story. The David Small operation is the U.S. government, believe it or not. The Goliath is this huge transnational criminal organization. that has technologies way beyond what the Secretary of Defense can deploy, or the normal national security apparatus is informed about. And this brings me to another point of this.
Once the NDA argument is laid down, Greer widens the frame again. Now the alleged secrecy is tied to money, trafficking, fake abductions, and finally to the claim of a staged existential crisis. That escalation lands harder because NASA's 2023 independent study report said there is no conclusive evidence in peer-reviewed scientific literature suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for UAP. So the section's value is not in proving the most extreme allegation. It is in showing how Greer builds his case. First, legal exposure, then financial secrecy, then psychological warfare, then
operational details, which we have learned and are continuing to learn about facilities and capabilities. Those need to be disclosed. Why? Because otherwise, because there is a massive technology gap deficit between the legal U.S. government and the illegal secret government, let's say, there's this huge technology gap. The only way to close that, first of all, it has to be known, which is we're working on informing key people of that. And secondly, it has to be known at such a detailed level that there could be ways to compensate for that I won't go into. So that kind of information is also very important. And we've been gaining more and more of that information as we have debriefed people who have been special forces operators and other people at key black site facilities. So all of that kind of information, someone may think that the sliver, because I know what the nature of compartmentalization is, and no one's got a huge picture, right? If they were an operator or in a lab or at a facility, you were working on a very narrow scope, right? And you were not even allowed to talk to people in the cubicle next to you. It's compartmented, highly compartmented. But our job is to then take all those pieces, I call this the disclosure mosaic I've spoken about before, and try to put together as complete a picture of not only what's going on, but where it's going on, who's doing it, what technologies they have, what are the locations specifically of operations, both corporate and governmental, that are doing these things. And I think not just here, but abroad. Because eventually this can certainly go OCONUS, outside continental United States. That is the plan. It's already being looked at. And it's one reason why I've been having meetings with people in over the years in Australia and Great Britain and the European Union, because this is not something restricted only to the United States. Primary focus right now is U.S. operations, but that is not going to be limited to that. So if you have information about operations in South America or Japan or Korea, Europe, anywhere in the world, that's important, because I can tell you that has been what's been authorized, is that to go both CONUS and OCONUS. Continental United States and outside continental United States is CONUS and OCONUS. And that it makes sense, because what I advised is, you could get things under control in CONUS, and the whole rest of the world is now still, completely out of control with these sort of assets, technologies, basis of operation, et cetera, and so on. And all you have to do is look at what we've already put out for 25 years or more from people like Jonathan Wigand, who was at a remote site on the Peruvian-Bolivian border when we knocked down an ET craft, and it came down, and that craft was non-human intelligence, or ET, and that was retrieved, but he was threatened with being thrown out of a helicopter and killed for ever talking about it. A very courageous young man when he gave me that interview 25 years ago. And so that is the sort of information that's important, because there's a specific operation in a specific location. And it was under cover of a astronomy telescope, which was repurposed as a Star Wars weapon system. And they knocked down this ET craft, and the personnel there were all US, but it was in South America. So this is why we know these operations are not restricted and that's just one example of many, many, many we have. And that's why these operations are global. And this is why the OCONUS, the outside continental United States part, is important. That's why we also need whistleblowers, witnesses, people who are involved with or saw, whether it was inadvertent or they were embedded in the operation. Those folks need to come forward.
Here, Greer turns from motive to infrastructure. The focus shifts to facilities, technology gaps, compartmentalization, overseas operations, and named geographic feeders outside the continental United States. That is where official records matter. Even by contrast, AARO maintains public UAP case material, imagery, and records, but none of that public-facing archive confirms the level of global covert architecture described here. So this section functions as map building. Greer is telling the viewer that the alleged system is not just hidden, it is distributed, layered, and international.
I will say that going down the road, not coming forward and cooperating with this, excuse me, is a liability for people keeping that secret. Most people view keeping the secret keeps them safe. I would argue at this point, keeping that secret is perilous because you're on the wrong side of the law on something that's now picked up steam and at an official level, although very clandestine. And I think that people need to come forward because they can be protected and immunized and they can help the world and the nation. But, doing nothing is actually going to be riskier than doing something right now, in my opinion. In fact, it's not my opinion. I know that to be the case. So I would say that before people start getting named by other whistleblowers, it would behoove them to come forward. That would be the smart way. Unless you're just a complete totalitarian fascist and a hardliner. And you don't want to, but that's at your own risk. But I think, frankly, 99% literally of everyone I have ever met with involved in these programs have been patriotic. They were doing their job. They were working for a corporation with national security clearances or an intelligence agency or the military. And they didn't know at the highest level that all those operations were being run by a criminal entity, a transnational criminal organization that has engaged in all kinds of horrific and illegal operations. So, but ignorance of that is not protective because in a conspiracy, again, as I mentioned, we're not talking conspiracy theories and internet rubbish. We're talking like a RICO, racketeering influence corrupt organization. That bill was put into place really to round up things like the mafia and organized crime. But what has now become clear is that this is a very large organized criminal activity that's in both the corporate and private and governmental sectors here and abroad. That is, of course, what I've been saying for 35 years or 30 years. That conclusion has now been reached in official circles that I can't speak to, but high enough that this is now going forward at a very good pace.